Hello, everyone. I am Jason Diggs, and I'm here with the wonderful Carrie Patrick.
Mm. Hi, it's good to see you.
And both Carrie and I have led Foundations of Facilitation, which is
Mhm.
the main course from Facilitation Academy. So this dialogue is sponsored by Facilitation Academy, and but our goal is really to resource all of you who are listening and watching around a very particular topic, which is
Mm.
somewhat elusive and um, I'm sure of great interest to many of you, which is how do we bring authentic relating into companies? How do we
Mhm.
get paid for our facilitation in the places that really can afford to bring in high quality facilitators, and they really want to be doing connection practices and team building and all of these things, whether that's a nonprofit that has a budget, or a small medium-sized business, or a startup, or maybe even corporate work with bigger companies. And Carrie, you've been doing this work with Dell Computer for
Mhm.
quite a while now.
Mhm.
And when I caught wind of what you were doing, I was like, oh, cool. I got to interview
Mhm.
Carrie and find out some of the nitty gritty of how this is being done.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. So do you want me to just tell you a little bit about this story?
Yeah, tell me your
Where do you
story
want me to start?
and a little bit how you started facilitating in companies.
Yeah. So the thing that I think grants me the access to a space like so I sit within Dell's cybersecurity group. So I'm kind of normally this kind of um, thing comes to the corporate world through like an HR function, like whether it's their talent development business or like they have lots of different words for it, but it's basically all embedded in HR. And so I sit within the business itself, which is a bit unusual, but they were growing really, really quickly and wanted to have like a dedicated person rather than just asking their like talent and culture team internally, like, hey, do you have somebody that can come help us with this thing? Um, and so my training, like my background is in organizational psychology, so like business psychology. Um, but the world of business psych doesn't really teach you anything about facilitation or about emotional intelligence. It's just all of the very like it's like an MBA with a little bit of behavioral science mixed in.
Mhm.
Um, and I noticed in my prior life, so I was at MetLife for a long time, and I left there as a director, partly because I was totally burnt out, and partly because like everything I was doing that I was taught in grad school didn't really work. Like it wasn't very effective. Like it would move the needle a tiny little bit, but everybody was very just not satisfied. It was just like, ah, there
Yeah.
was always a sense of disappointment.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think people who have been around authentic relating for more than a few months really know that it's special. People have
Yeah.
really amazing experiences. Um,
Yes.
and the facilitator could be someone even without a lot of experience, but the games themselves
Yep.
speak for themselves. And so the quality of experiences we're able to create through leading games and taking shares and really uh,
Mhm.
being with people in a relational way, it's very special. It's almost like a cutting edge thing that we're a part of. And it is starting to filter into mainstream society a little bit more, like year after
Yeah.
year. I've been in the AR movement for 8 years, and yeah, there was a way in which like people started talking about this 5 years ago, and it almost seemed like the holy grail of like, how do I bring authentic relating into companies? Because the experiences we were having in these circling workshops and AR game nights were
Uh-huh.
so profound. And you see someone come in and like over the course of months, they're having massive growth, right?
Yeah.
And then you have these businesses which have very big training budgets, right? And what they're doing is organizational development. And so you
Mhm.
have a degree in organizational development, or a
Mhm.
related degree, which gives you kind of access to do this and legitimacy.
Right.
And not
Yep.
everybody who's trying to do it has that.
Yep.
But that's okay. Like
Mhm.
high quality
Absolutely.
high quality facilitation is high quality facilitation.
Yes.
It's needed in many aspects, many segments of the business world. And so how do we talk about relational,
Hmm.
um, the art and form of being relational with one another, or promoting connection within a
Yeah.
business that it is in language that they can really relate to?
Yes. I think my favorite analogy that seems to be the one everybody goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense," is like when I'm introducing all of this, like if I'm starting a leadership development training, like within my group, within the cybersecurity group, I'll say to them, this is not going to be like a typical training that you're used to, because normally what we do is, like, let's say we're trying to learn a thing, and let's say our specific thing is I want to learn how to ride a bike. And so usually the way we go about it is we learn all about the history of the bike, we learn about all of its individual components, we study it very closely, maybe we'll learn a little bit about like physics, and we like get to know the thing at a very analytical, we study it with lots of science, and then we think we know it, when in fact nobody ever took the time to sit on top of a bike and try to pedal it forward. So
Mm,
we don't actually know how to ride a bike, we know all about the bike and how to take it apart and how it operates, and but nobody ever took the time to like practice the thing. And I think that's the beauty, like that's the power about AR and circling, is it's not teaching people emotional intelligence or from that very analytical scientific way that most of the world tends to try to understand things. It has us do the thing, and we get to do them with other people, and so we get this really important feedback that we could never get otherwise.
mm,
And like together those two people have this experience that informs each of themselves, and it's this like constantly evolving dynamic beautiful thing that, like, that's why it's so powerful. And I think all of us who have experienced it immediately recognize that, like, oh, this is different in an important way.
yes.
Yeah.
And our culture is so much more ready for this work than it
Yeah.
was 5 years ago.
Oh
Like
my gosh.
that's how much
100%.
it's transformed. And a while ago, I started to think about this as like, oh, authentic relating, these are games to grow emotional intelligence. And that's
Hmm.
what I called the second section of my book. And I started talking about it that way, and thinking about it. And emotional intelligence is like one of the most groundbreaking, important books in the last 30 years.
Mm.
In fact, it came out like 27, 28 years ago.
It's been a
Uh,
while.
and I think for the first 20 years, our society was still catching up. And like, we just didn't like, we knew how to like study emotional intelligence, we knew how to define it,
Yeah.
but no one knew a lot about how to develop it in adults.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think authentic relating and even circling, it was kind of ahead of the curve because we realized like, oh, all of the growth happens in the present moment. So
Yep.
let's leave the past behind. Let's let the future take care of itself. Let's come right here, right now, and be relational with one another. And then all this stuff
Yeah.
starts to happen. So how do you talk about that in a business setting? Well, it's experiential learning, right?
Yep.
It's like, what are the other key phrases that you're using help
Mm.
people translate it in that environment?
Yeah. I think the other thing that I talk to, or like try to point at as like this is why this thing matters, is that they all, like, certainly within my group, like they're all very technically specially trained, and that's true for a lot of, like, no matter what kind of industry you work in, like you're going to have all of your specializations, and they need those skill sets. Like the way we go about learning those kinds of things is, again, very very different, tends to be like that same analytical thing, and that's a, that's an important part of their job and it's necessary. But then there's all of this other people stuff that's like,
Mhm.
well, how does my team actually collaborate? How do we work through the problems? What happens when I disagree with, Bob over here? And like how the dynamics, and there's nobody, it's almost like nobody knows what to do about it. They approach it from like, well, this is just isn't a big deal. I'll pretend like it's not, it just doesn't matter. Or like there's all kinds of ways that people sort of in the not knowing, choose something to do, it's
Mhm.
usually not very effective. Is that like kind of what you were poking at?
Totally. And it's just, the entire field of self-help has been
Yeah.
so big in the last 20 years. And like these concepts, basic concepts have filtered into mainstream society. And
Mhm.
there's still going to be people who have antibodies to it and think of like, oh, that's a bunch of woo-woo bullshit.
Yep,
But that's actually not
totally.
the norm anymore. It's
Right.
much more like people are receptive, and it just takes a little bit of translation. And so one of the ways that I think of translations is like, oh, we all have these strategies. And the
Mhm.
strategies were created when we were children, and
Yep.
obviously that's really obvious to people these days. So then what do you do about it? What does AR say about this? Well, one of the things I'll say is like, authentic relating isn't actually about healing. Like that's the realm of psychotherapy. It's actually
Yep.
about just putting new options on the menu. And
Yep.
there's something about that people are like, oh, there's all these communication strategies. Some of them are really unhelpful, some of them are neutral, and some of them are very skilled. Let's look at the ones that are really skilled and actually be able to choose those more often. Like,
Mhm.
and there's something about able to put things in such simple terms that um, it like causes light bulbs to go off for people. That's what I realized through teaching and writing in the last 8 years, is that if I can really, there's a simplicity beyond the complexity. And if I can
Mm.
really talk about things in a very simple way and
Mhm.
wait for people's interest to be piqued, then I can talk about it in a complex way.
Yeah.
And I think authentic relating is really good at teaching in these really bite-sized chunks. And
Mhm.
I think that's just the way learning is going. People don't want to be lectured for 45 minutes straight about a topic anymore,
No, no.
especially with like the way that smartphones have affected our brains. Like that kind of stuff, it just doesn't work anymore. But if you can teach
No.
something in 2 minutes and then put people into an exercise to experience it,
Yes.
that's gold.
Yes. And I tell everybody up front, like, there is just a necessary component of me, like, I'm gonna have to, like, talk at you for a short period of time just to be able to give you enough context and info to work with, but that my role, like, I see it as almost a not quite a moral duty, but, like, it serves all of us if I keep that as short as possible,
Mhm.
and then we just move on to doing the thing. Like, that's where all of the real learning and discovering, and I want there to be lots and lots of space for, like, when we come back and we're doing the discussion piece, it's like, what was that like for you, and how do you relate it to your world? And then that'll spark a conversation or an idea with somebody else, and that, like, in that discussion too is its own experiential learning moment that we can all have. And I like to just keep a lot of space for that too, because I don't know everything. like all of them have their own stores of knowledge too. And I really see my role as just like, truly as a facilitator, like, you're always just trying to facilitate their own, like, experience to come up and be digested and shared among the people,
Mhm.
because some people have their own really brilliant insights that help others. So
And that's the
yeah.
style of leadership that people are really responding to a lot more in our modern
Yeah.
society, is like, hey, I don't know everything, but I have this experience and this is what I've learned so far. What do you think? And
Hmm.
there's something about that approach, it's dignity and humility together, essentially, like
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
that people really respond to. But let's go into some specifics. So
Okay.
you have a unique um, position that you are
Hmm.
inside of a company, which is
Yep.
a well-known company, Dell Computer. Uh,
Hmm.
so you're not necessarily needing to do, proposals and selling, but you
Right.
are, but you are kind of still doing the same thing. You still
In a
have
way.
to enroll people in like, this is a good idea, and you know,
Uh-huh.
do you want to do this with your team and all of that. So how does that process look for you? And
uh, yeah. I when I first, like, when they hired me, uh so it's like my first day I started, and I'm like, okay, well, I know that you want me to create a leadership development program. Okay, great. You're Dell. Like, I'm assuming Dell already has leadership training to some capacity. So what exactly am I doing here? Like where's the gap between what there's already offered and what the need is? And I got a whole lot of, well, we don't really know. Like nobody could give me a very the well-defined answer. So I just went right to the top, like the guy that, like the head of all the cybersecurity people. And I'm like, okay, you have the biggest chunk of this, securities org, because there's also like physical security and product and application security. But like the cyber group is the biggest chunk of it. And he was like, yeah, I think I got lucky because his wife is an executive coach, and he had gotten a master's in I think some kind of behavioral science. So very similar to my org psych background. So we talked the same language, even though he was also like this highly trained technical dude.
Mhm.
And he's like, what I see is this problem with basically emotional intelligence. And I was like, okay, great. Let's focus on that. That's perfect, because that's like the water that I swim in. And I felt really nervous about just doing AR. I'm like, how much can I actually get away with?
Mm.
Um, and what I'm learning is that everybody's like, this is amazing. Can you please bring more? So I've just been getting more and more courageous over the last 2 years. It's like, well, I'll try like maybe let's do noticing, and I just try the like really easy, light, fluffy games. And now I'm like, no, we're just going to dive into shadow work. Because I'm finding that like people, their appetite is just like, oh, that's really great, give me more, give me more. They're like really interested in digging into, I think, their everyday problems that are causing them a lot of grief.
Mm.
um and so like the moral of all of that, like my sort of suggestion to anybody is, if it scares you, like if you notice that you're kind of afraid and it feels a little edgy, perfect, you're on the right track. Like that's the thing to go for. Like if it's making you uncomfortable and you're a little nervous about how this is going to land for people, but like you just know that it's so true and it's important, like that's the thing to follow. Don't play it safe. just just go do the thing that you're really passionate about.
Yeah, and I would say as a coupled with that, like don't play it safe, bring the real juice, right? But
Yeah,
don't necessarily talk about it in the exact same way that you would talk about it in an AR game in your living room,
totally.
community center, or online with Zoom with
Right.
other authentic relating people and circling people, because we have jargon. And it's like the more we can bring translation as well, like you kind of fly under the banner of leadership development.
uh,
And then
yeah.
you're like, oh, emotional intelligence, let me fly under that banner. How much of what you're doing in your work is directly inspired by AR?
A huge chunk of it. I think I take, mm, it's probably a third. So um, I do recognize that, particularly in the corporate world, and certainly among people who are very technically trained, uh, they will need this. They're going to want to know, like, what's the science say? Give me the facts. What's the research? And so I absolutely have to bring that as well. Like, I can't just say, if you use this communication tool, it'll help you with your team better. Like they want to know the neuroscience behind it. They want to know like what the data says. And so there's lots of talking about numbers. So I see that kind of as scaffolding around the practice of AR. Like it helps because AR, I think, speaks to our intuitive, like body sort of like, I just know that this is a thing that matters and is true, but I can't exactly tell you why. And so I need both pieces. So that's like a third is the data and the science, and then the neuroscience and the research, and then like a third is the like actual AR practice itself. And then I think the other third is a lot of the world of somatic and like body. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like I think AR speaks to the interrelational, the like what's it like to do this with another person. Like it's almost like this practice of self-discovery in the context of like me and another person or me and a group. Um, And then I think somatics is another big piece of my work too, of like, how do I, what does my body know that my brain doesn't, so to say, or like what's the world, like what does that world look like, and how do I bring those kinds of intuitive skills, the things that like feed our creativity and that feed our capacity to hold nuance and ambiguity, because that's the thing that gets people freaked out a lot at work, is just like when things change all the time and they don't know what to do about it.
Mhm.
um yeah, so I think, yeah, that data, neuroscience, AR, and somatic work all
Mhm.
smashed together.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that. Like there's a lot of my work that's actually based on polarity theory. And polarity theory is an
Oh,
entire um, field of study within organizational development.
uh-huh.
And I just happen to practice Taoism and Qigong, and like I'm fascinated by
Yeah.
polarity. And so when authentic relating, dignity and humility is actually a distinction that comes directly from authentic relating.
Yeah.
And I started to teach it as a polarity. And then a lot of things started to click into place. And I just noticed that dealing with paradox and polarity and ambiguity and uncertainty is really, really important. And like,
Yes.
how do we do that? We hold multiple perspectives, right? And so it is really interesting how authentic relating has all of these teachings that seem to be a collection of other things. Some of it even comes from integral theory. Like a lot of AR
Yep.
facilitators are really into that body of knowledge. So some of it's unclear of like where it comes from, but definitely noticing and curiosity and empathy game and like all of these things, and specifically the games to develop all of this, that is uniquely authentic relating. And I think people out there are just so much more ready for it. you know
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a corporate gig a week and a half from now, and a lot of what I'm doing is like, okay, tell a story about your personal life around X,
Okay.
Y, and Z. And it's like, and then I'm going to weave it back into their work life, because I just have this belief that if they really know each other more and they're really personally invested in one another, because it's a
Mhm.
small team that I'm working with. Um, their creativity is going to go up, their synergy is going to go up, their
Yes.
productivity is going to go up, like their buy-in for the mission is going to go up if they're bought into each other's success on a personal
Mhm.
level. And
Mhm.
so and I think it's just people are ready for this.
Yes.
So maybe we'll wind down a little bit. I just want to give people a taste and some ideas about how to do this. What advice would you give someone who is a facilitator out there who has been trained,
Mhm.
or maybe seeking training? We have this Foundations of Facilitation course that
Sure.
is 12 weeks of training with facilitators like myself and Carrie, who have had a lot of
Mhm.
experience in this realm. Um, how would you go about bringing this into, like, having this be a career move, having
Hmm.
being paid as a facilitator for the first or second or third time, whether that's a short workshop, long shop workshop? Like, how would you advise people trying to do this?
Oof, that's hard. It's almost like, oh, the answer to that depends on the context of your situation, of course. So like, oh my God, there's so many answers to that. But how do I, like, what's the like whole feeling of it? Um, so let me just feel into that for a second. It's like, if I'm, because I've been in that position of, I'm outside of the corporate world. Like I did some consulting work as well. And it's like me trying to be a consultant in, other ways besides just talent development. Um, and how do I speak about that? I worked with like startups, and there were a couple of VC firms, and a community college here in Austin that has an accelerator program. and an incubator as well. And the the commonality, like over and over, and it's true at Dell as well, like the common thread in all of them is they all have people like there's the just day-to-day job function, and that's fine. They can figure that out. But you know, I talk like lots of startup companies who, you've got this startup guy who's really brilliant at the thing, and now they're getting really successful. And now he's got 5 or 6 people under him,
Mhm.
and now he's spending his entire day just dealing with people, and he's just like lost, doesn't know what to do about it. Or there was a team, and they got somebody new, and it's kind of disrupted everything, and the manager doesn't quite know what to do about it. Like there's always a people problem, there's always a relational stickiness that everybody's trying to figure out what to do about. And speaking to how AR, or just you as a facilitator, like your own expertise in navigating the interpersonal world, like not to say that you're some big wise guru who has all of the answers, but I think as a facilitator in AR, or like whatever kind of your like big body of knowledge is, there's such power in that, in the ability to sit with people and help them understand themselves, not because like necessarily you're giving them direct knowledge, but you're giving them some space and some permission, and like a kind of a structure to follow that helps them discover themselves. um, and so it's like there's a million ways that that impacts companies and teams. Like you could talk about, here's what it does to, you can start like naming all of the metrics that we care about, like productivity and creativity and innovation, and employee engagement, and how long people stick around, and do they leave your, like it impacts everything. So like I don't
Mhm.
know, pick 3 or 4 or 5 and talk about them, and everybody will be very excited about it. But really, at the end of the day, I think it's, if you're doing, like you as a facilitator, if you're doing your own work constantly, like you're kind of in your own process of self-discovery, which creates some ground under you to know that this is a thing well, and it's a gift that you can bring to the world, and like that's your mindset. Like the more you know yourself, the more you'll be able to like facilitate that ground for other people too. And people just know, they pick up on that. There's just a thing they will be naturally attracted to, like gravity.
Mhm.
Um, so
Yeah.
as long as, yeah.
Yeah. And there's a paradox there even. It's like the more you know yourself, the more you
Yeah.
realize that you're a mystery that cannot be known, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But there's something about your willingness to look inside and your willingness to, really bring these life lessons and communication lessons and relationship lessons out of your own practice. Authentic relating is a practice. It's a way of being, right? The
Yeah.
more people are going to be attracted to that, and
Yeah.
that's really what develops this dignified in humble leadership. Is like, oh yeah, I've been practicing this for a while, and this is what I've learned, and this is what it's amazing for. I've seen this in groups of people, and so having confidence and dignity in what you're sharing about the possibilities, and your own self-learning. There was some principle that I gleaned from something you said 20 minutes ago in the dialogue, which is the first thing you did at Dell was you asked a lot of questions. Wait,
Mm-hmm.
what do you want me to be doing? Like, maybe not quite that way, but like,
Right.
what are you wanting? What are you needing? What do you
Yeah.
notice about your, the way that power dynamics work in your company? What are you noticing about uh, the feedback that you're getting from your employees, or that
Mhm.
like just asking questions, listening, and when you hear an answer, to just use the reflective listening of like repeat one part of what they said back to them, and wait
Yeah.
and let them share more, right? And summarize what they're saying in
Yeah.
one or two or three sentences, and then wait and then let them share more. Like that kind of tool, which we develop in AR through the empathy game and all these other things. that's the main tool for selling, which is, it's not even the right word, right? That's the main tool for being valuable.
Yeah.
Listening and presence are inherently valuable in and of themselves.
Yeah.
And so if
It's just having conversations.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so if you're doing that in the process, you're going to be learning a lot about them, and they're going to be learning about their organization through talking to you.
Yep. Yeah, and I think too, I think you're pointing at something really important. Is like in that process, it's like they get kind of this taste of you, and
Mhm.
like the skill that you can. I mean, everyone that does this, they're like, oh, I like this. Let's bring them in so they can do that with our team. That like because like my experience at Dell has been, I got this initial group of 20 people to lead through a training, and there were two or three of them that were like, oh hey, that thing you were doing, that's really cool. And my team, they're having this problem. Can you come work with us? And so then I'd go work with them, and then so and so would talk about it to somebody else. And I've like just gradually gotten more and more teams, or like somebody's like, hey, I'm having my own like personal thing, can we do some one-on-one coaching, to now it's like, not that everybody within the cyber, there's like 1,000 people or so, like I don't get to touch all of them, but now I'm training like the head of the cybersecurity group and all of his direct reports, because it's just word gets around.
Mhm.
And that's all you got to do. Like just go be you, and do the thing that you're really really passionate about in each and every conversation you have with people.
Mhm.
And it's like people get attracted to it.
Yeah, it's embodiment. It's like the
Yeah.
more that you've embodied the practice of authentic relating and the different aspects, and the more you've lived them, the more that attractive
Yes.
that is, and the more
Yeah.
confidence you can have around it. Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
this is awesome to dialogue with you about, Carrie.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I'm excited about what you're doing in Dell, and I'm sure what you'll be doing for years to come to bring this
Yep.
work in different environments. And yeah, if you have watched this far, thank you so much for being with us. And
Yeah.
I really want AR to spread to as many aspects of our society as possible.
Me
And
too.
that's 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 why I do what I do. That's why Facilitation Academy exists, for
Mhm.
training people in this, and yeah, go forth
Yep.
and facilitate.
Yes. Thank you. It was lovely.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.